Thank you very much indeed, Sheila, for that introduction, and a massive thank you to all of you for coming along here today. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm standing here today making this speech on the day and certainly in the week that many young people across Scotland return to school, including, of course, almost 60,000 young children who are entering Primary 1. 60,000 excited little minds, eager to learn, curious about the world around them. And the duty that we have as a society to each and every one of them is, I think, absolutely sacred. I had the privilege, and it was indeed a privilege, of visiting some of those Primary 1 children just a wee while ago at Clovenstone Primary. And it's impossible, I always think, when I visit schools, particularly the early years of primary school, not to find yourself thinking back to your own school days. Now, I have to say, with every year that passes, that becomes more of a challenge for me, since it is 40 years since I entered Primary 1. But nevertheless, I, as a young person, was very fortunate. The education I got at Dreghorn Primary School and Greenwood Academy in Ayrshire was first class. The teachers I had at both of those schools were superb, and the quality of the education I got, together with, and this I think is a crucial point, wonderful parents who always encouraged me to see horizons beyond anything that they had ever experienced, are the reasons that this working class girl from Ayrshire can stand here today before you as the First Minister of Scotland. So it matters deeply to me personally that every young girl and every young boy growing up today, regardless of where they were born, regardless of what their family circumstances might be, get the same chances that I had when I was growing up all these years ago. And of course, as Sheila has rightly said, it also matters to us as a nation. Scotland pioneered the idea of universal access to school education back in the 17th and 18th centuries. And ever since then, a commitment to education has been part of our identity, part of our very sense of ourselves as a country. But I think it's much more than just pride in our past. Excellence in education is essential to our prosperity, our competitiveness, our well-being. Indeed, it is essential to our overall success as a nation in the future as well, just as it has been in the past. And so, since this is the first school year to start since I became First Minister, I want to make clear beyond any doubt the intention of me and of my government to ensure that Scotland's proud educational traditions are renewed and refreshed for the modern age, so that they stand not as a symbol of our past, but as the hallmark of our future as a country. I want to be able to say, and I want to be able to say it with confidence and with evidence, that there is no better place in the world to be educated than here in Scotland. And I want to know, so that I can assure others, that this claim holds true for all young people in Scotland, regardless of their background or their circumstances. And in outlining how my government will help the children starting school this week, and indeed all young people in Scotland, to have the best possible start in life, I will set out two overarching priorities. The first is straightforward. We want to raise standards everywhere, for every pupil in every school in the country. And the second follows on from the first. We want to raise standards most quickly in the areas where improvement is most needed. In particular, we are determined to close the gap in educational outcomes between pupils from the most and the least deprived parts of our country. Before I talk about how we are going about doing that, I want to emphasise a basic and very important truth, albeit one that is far too often overlooked. Despite the undoubted challenges that we face, Scotland's schools are a success story. The last 8 years, we all know, have been tough. The recession and the deep public spending cuts that followed have created pressures for the Scottish Government. They've created pressures for local government and for many families across the country. But the fact remains that education in Scotland has, against that background, made progress. The introduction of Curriculum for Excellence has been a major step forward and one which is now attracting international attention. It gives teachers more flexibility, it provides a broader education for our young people, and it sets higher standards for achievement than ever before. More than 500 schools have been rebuilt or refurbished since 2007. That's 1/5 of all school premises in the country and 200 more than in the previous 8 years. We've provided funding to maintain teacher numbers this year. In 2006, more than 15,000 primary 1 children were in classes of more than 25. Today, that figure is below 500. In 2007, just 45% of students stayed on at school until 6th year. Now the proportion is 62% staying on until 6th year. And one reason I'm sure amongst many that increase has been possible is that we chose as a government to retain the educational maintenance allowance when it was being abolished in England, a step which benefits 35,000 school pupils and college students every year. And we're seeing better outcomes than ever before. School leaver destinations are the best on record. Of the students who left school last year, more than 9 out of 10 were in employment, education or training 9 months later. And of course, 2 weeks ago, young people in Scotland gained a record number of passes at higher and advanced higher. And the successes haven't just been about hires. More people received awards, national certificates and national progression awards, qualifications relating to wider skills for life and work, for example, in childcare, in construction, leadership and personal finance. The fact is we're providing a more flexible school environment with more qualifications which provide real routes into work. And preparing young people for the world of work is going to be an even bigger focus for us in the future. It's an area where we're working increasingly closely with employers. We're implementing a national plan for developing the young workforce and widening access to our universities. As a result, we're expanding what young people can learn and where they can learn it. Finally, I think it's worth saying something about school inspections because they attracted some attention last week. In our last national performance report, 90% of schools were graded satisfactory or better. But to suggest, as some have done, that this means 90% of schools are just satisfactory is simply wrong, because that ignores the or better part of that categorisation. In fact, the percentage of schools with a grading of just satisfactory was 21%. 69% of schools were graded as good, very good or excellent. Now, I want to be clear at this point. I'm not satisfied with that, and none of us should be satisfied with that. As a result of the work we're doing, I want to see the percentage of schools in the good or better category rise on a year-on-year basis. Education Scotland is currently reviewing its approaches to inspection, and I've asked them to advise me specifically on any changes to our system of school inspection that they consider would help to support that wider improvement work. But the basic picture is clear. In every part of this country, Scotland has good schools, good teachers, and our young people are good learners. Standards have risen and are continuing to rise. And that's testament to the work of our local authorities. It's also due to the contribution of many other individuals and organisations. For example, the third sector, youth workers, community learning and development staff all work increasingly closely with our schools. But most of all, it's a huge tribute to the dedication of teachers, parents and students across the country. Wester Hailes Education Centre, where we are all right now, is a good example of this progress, and in many ways an example that brings all of what I've just been talking about to life. In 2009, just 6% of school leavers here gained at least one higher. Last year, 43% did, 6% to 43%. Now, I'm sure this school is ambitious to do even better than that. But this is a place where better schooling and better results are leading to better life chances for many young people. And there's 2 points to make about that. The first is that it's impossible to think about that success without thinking about the expertise, the commitment and the passion of teachers here, led by Sheila and Stuart Heggie. I also met great teachers at Clovenstone Primary earlier this morning, led by Carolyn Didcock. And can I take the opportunity to thank Dylan and Olga, the primary 7 pupils who showed me around the primary school this morning. The fact is, I see at schools right across the country just how much we owe to our teachers and to our head teachers. And that's why one of the very important points I want to make is the importance of investing in their professional development. And we're doing that through Teaching Scotland's Future. We've established the Scottish College for Leadership, Educational Leadership, and next month will mark the start of our new master's level qualification for headship. By the summer of 2019, it will be mandatory for all new head teachers to have one of these master's level qualifications, because we know that supporting teachers and head teachers to be local leaders and drivers of change and improvement is an essential part of supporting our young people. And the second point is that the success and improvements we've seen here at Wester Hailes and across Scotland should and must encourage us to aim for even greater improvements. Because although standards have risen across the board, we do still need to do much more. The recent SSLN report, albeit that is a snapshot survey, suggesting that standards of literacy had fallen, was of significant concern to me, and it should be of significant concern to everybody who cares about the future of our young people. And that is why so much of the attainment work we are undertaking is focused so firmly on literacy and numeracy. And on the subject of needing to do more, we know that there is still a significant and unacceptable attainment gap within and between schools in different parts of Scotland. Now, there is already some evidence that progress is being made, though that progress is not far or fast enough. For example, in 2008, just over 2 in 10 students from the most deprived areas of Scotland obtained at least 1 higher or equivalent. Last year, that figure was almost 4 in 10. But for students from the most affluent areas of the country, the figure wasn't 4 out of 10, the figure was 8 out of 10. In other words, when it comes to hires, school leavers from the most deprived 20% of areas in Scotland currently do half as well as school leavers from the most affluent areas. That is quite simply unacceptable, and we must strive to improve that. And my aim, to put it very bluntly, is to close that attainment gap, not by a bit, but to close that attainment gap completely. It won't be done overnight, I accept that, but it must be done, because the existence of it is more than just an economic and social challenge for us all, it's also a moral challenge. Indeed, I would argue that it goes to the very heart of who we are and how we see ourselves as a country. I remember 5 years ago I attended the funeral service of Jimmy Reid, the great trade union activist in Govan Old Parish Church, and Billy Connolly was one of the speakers at Jimmy's funeral. And he told a story, a very, very moving story, about going for walks in Govan with Jimmy when they were both young. This would probably have been in the 1950s, and they would have been going along streets in the constituency I now represent. But Jimmy would point to a tower block and say, behind that window is a guy who could win Formula 1, behind that one there's a winner of round the world yacht race, and behind the next one, etc. And none of them will ever get the chance to sit at the wheel of a racing car or in the cockpit of a yacht. Now, that's a poignant way of expressing the way in which poverty stifles aspiration. Despite our many achievements, it's still far too relevant today. And of course, it's not just relevant to the exceptional occupations like the ones Jimmy was talking about. If you look at a profession like medicine, the most deprived 20% of areas in Scotland provide 1 in 5 of our school leavers, but just 1 in 20 successful entrants for medicine and dentistry. Now, that underrepresentation is not a reflection of young people's talent. It reflects the fact that for all the great work that goes on in schools across the country, too many children have their life chances influenced more by where they live than by how talented they are or how hard they work. And if we're missing out on many of the talented medics of the future, it doesn't take much imagination to know what else we're missing out on. Engineers, computer coders, life scientists, artists, teachers, even the odd MSP or MP, perhaps. The attainment gap doesn't simply hold back young people who deserve the chance to fulfil their potential. It impoverishes all of us as a society. So that's why closing that gap is a defining challenge for the government that I lead and for our society as a whole. Now, I'm very aware, as I'm sure everybody in this room is, that a huge amount of what we need to do goes far beyond the education system. By the time children are entering school at the age of 5, the gap in vocabulary between the poorest and wealthiest families can already be 18 months. So at a time when the UK government cuts to tax credits and welfare are hurting so many households, the work we are doing to support children and families matters hugely. That's why it's vital to tackle poverty. It's vital to use the Scottish Parliament's new welfare powers wisely when we get them. And it's why we're supporting parents through investment in more health visitors for young children and through early reading projects like BookBug. And it's why, of course, our major expansion of early learning and childcare is one of the best investments we will ever make as a country. But school education and how that relates to people's home and family circumstances is hugely important. That's why it is the main focus of my remarks today. And while we must recognise and we must address the factors beyond the school gates, we must never, ever become content to shrug our shoulders and accept that these factors make under-attainment in our schools inevitable for some young people. Instead, I think we've got a duty to see school education as one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal to help to overcome the disadvantages associated with poverty. We must make a reality of that old adage that education is the great leveller in life. So I want to outline today some of the work we're doing to increase standards in all schools and, crucially, our focus on raising them most quickly in the areas where it's most needed. We're focusing some of our key initiatives on primary schools because we firmly believe that if we can close the attainment gap when children are young, the benefits will continue into secondary school and well beyond. And we'll focus in particular on young people's literacy, numeracy and their health and well-being. We're ensuring that the education system adapts to the career paths and work patterns of the future. That's a major theme of our work on developing the young workforce. But we understand that to do that, we've got to ensure that all children have a good grounding in the most essential skills. After all, children's ability to read, write and count and be confident, happy and healthy learners underpins their success in all other subjects and will underpin their success right throughout their lives. So I'll talk about our plans for improving literacy and numeracy in particular. But I want to begin with a fundamental point. When it comes to the education of our young people and when it comes to improving attainment and closing the attainment gap, what matters to me is what works. In fact, that's the only thing that should matter to any of us. What can we show and evidence to be effective? That's why the Scottish Government has been happy and will continue to be happy to learn lessons from right around the world. For example, in the last 6 months, I've visited successful and improving schools in Tower Hamlets in London and in Brooklyn in New York. And it's why all of our attainment initiatives within Scotland, as I'll go on to discuss, encourage schools to learn from each other. I was hearing at the primary school earlier on today the importance of the cluster of schools in which they sit. But if you believe that what matters is what works, I think we also need to accept something else. We need here in Scotland to have the information available about children's attainment to be able to measure progress consistently so that we can see what's working and also so that we can see where we still need to improve. And that need for better and more reliable information is especially acute in primary and early secondary school. Virtually all local authorities in Scotland already recognise the importance of assessment for those age groups. 30 out of 32 currently use it. Standardised assessment helps teachers. It provides useful information to support their own judgment of children's progress. But many local authorities right now use different systems, and that makes it much more difficult, makes it pretty near impossible to get a clear and consistent picture of progress. So that is why we are now developing a national improvement framework. I'll say more about the framework and in particular how it will address this issue of a lack of clear and consistent information when I set out my programme for government to the Scottish Parliament exactly 2 weeks today. But the basic purpose of the improvement framework will be to provide clarity on what we are seeking to achieve and to allow us to measure clearly where we're succeeding and where we still need to do more. Because by doing that, it will enable us to raise standards more quickly. And as a result of that, it will help to change the future for young people across our country. And of course, by doing all of that, the the improvement framework will help to underpin all of the other steps that we're taking to improve attainment. Last year, we launched the Raising Attainment for All programme. That's a voluntary programme now covering more than 250 schools in 24 local authority areas. It's not about significant extra funding. That's not always possible in the financial climate we live in, but it's about helping schools to try new things and to learn from each other. So the schools themselves identify what they will do to improve standards. They then assess whether those actions are working. One school is focusing on setting aside time so that children can read for pleasure. Another is prioritising written work amongst a certain age group. Another might work on improving numeracy. And others are trying different approaches according to their particular needs. And these ideas and examples and evidence are shared with other schools so that the ones that work best can be used more widely. And Raising Attainment for All has been working well in the past year, but we know we need to do more. So we're now supporting the recruitment of an attainment advisor in every local authority area, and we're launching 2 further initiatives specifically for primary schools. The Read, Write, Count, Literacy and Numeracy campaign began just yesterday, and in the coming months, all children in Primary 1 will be sent a pack of books and learning materials. Primary 2 and 3 will receive a pack next year. And the campaign encourages young children to read, and crucially, it recognises the fundamental importance of parents. So it provides advice for possible activities, whether it's reading to children at bedtime or playing counting games in the supermarket. And it also includes special sessions targeted in areas of greatest deprivation, which bring parents together with teachers. And of course, most importantly of all in this context, the Scottish Government announced earlier this year that we will allocate an additional £100 million over the next 4 years to a Scottish Attainment Challenge. That challenge focuses specifically on and provides additional funding for literacy, numeracy and health and wellbeing in primary schools in our most deprived areas. A large proportion of the Attainment Fund has been allocated to the 7 local authorities that have the highest concentration of pupils living in poverty. And each of these authorities is developing its own plans according to its own priorities. Most of this extra funding is being used to recruit more staff, more teachers, classroom assistants, learning support specialists and family link workers. And as a result, the schools will be able to provide even better support for children and for parents in the areas where it is most needed. So Western Bartonshire, for example, will provide more targeted support as children move from nursery to primary and then from primary to secondary school. It's also recruiting more maths specialists to improve teaching in primary school. Dundee's plans have got a strong focus on music, on drama and dance. Glasgow is recruiting up to 90 additional teachers and looking at staff development, amongst other issues. And the point is, each local authority has flexibility, and the government, together with each authority, will closely monitor the results of the different interventions so that evidence of what works can be shared more widely. But the fund isn't solely for those 7 local authorities, and today I'm able to confirm that it will support an additional 57 schools in another 14 local authority areas. And that takes the total number of primary schools benefiting from the Attainment Fund to more than 300. And one of the reasons I visited Clovenstone today is that it's one of the Edinburgh schools that will benefit. It's a school, as I saw this morning, that already has a strong focus on literacy and numeracy and which is working increasingly closely with parents in the wider community. I was able to hear this morning of the successful efforts to re-establish the Parent Council after many years without one. But this funding will enable it to do even more for all of its students, including the boys and girls I met today who were just starting Primary 1. And the final area we're focusing on is aspiration. And I think this is particularly important, particularly for some of our youngsters in the most deprived parts of our country. And I want to be clear what I mean here, because it's sometimes easy to talk as though it's the job of adults to give children aspirations, as though they wouldn't have ambitions otherwise. But actually, most young people are full of ambition. Most young people are full of dreams. What is often lacking as they get older is the information, the support, the role models, which can make them see, and perhaps even more importantly, make them believe that those aspirations are achievable for people like them. So that's why we're putting together an aspirations package for schools. We're going to work with organisations like the Children's University, as well as with local employers and entrepreneurs, to ensure that young people have access to the experience, the knowledge, the networks that make them realise what they can achieve. It's a practical approach which will help young people understand the work that they need to do to realise their ambitions, and it's consistent with the aims of the Commission on Developing the Young Workforce. And it's another way of giving all our young people a fair chance to succeed, to find work which makes good use of their talents and which enables them to lead productive, fulfilling and happy lives. And that, I think, more than anything else, is what this government wants to achieve. I spoke earlier about Jimmy Reid's reflections on the wasted potential he saw when he was growing up in Govan. And Jimmy's famous Glasgow University rectorial address in 1972 captured the same point differently but just as well when he said that the untapped resources of the North Sea are as nothing compared to the untapped resources of our people. My priority for my time as First Minister, and let me be clear, I want to be judged on this. My priority for my time as First Minister is that every young person gets the same advantage that I did when I was lucky growing up in Ayrshire. They should know that if they have the talent and they work hard enough, they should be able to fulfil their potential. They should be able to achieve their dreams, that there is nothing in their background or family circumstances that will hold them back. Now, that's a challenge for schools, for local government, for the Scottish Government. Indeed, it's a challenge for society as a whole, but it is one in which I and my government is determined to show leadership, because by succeeding here, we will secure a fairer and more prosperous future, not just for the boys and girls starting school today, but for all young people and for our country as a whole. That's a prize, in my view, worth striving for, and I am determined to do it. Thank you very much indeed for listening this morning.